Kanani could have been amazing. She is very pretty, but for one thing, I was living in Hawaii when she first came out. My dad was stationed over there, so I spent a few months out of the year for several years living there. And Kanani doesn't really feel Hawaiian. It just kind of has a very loose aesthetic painted on. And otherwise, like, it's interesting. Her story is that classic. It was like an Nanny McPhee film and some other stuff where the cultured city girl goes, or city people, whatever, relative, they're always cousins, goes to the, like, backward south and has to, like, deal with, oh, these people are so uncultured and whatever. And it's very interesting they chose to do it. It's like a cultured girl from New York going to Hawaii. And maybe that wasn't their intention, but that is the trope they're using. Where she's like, oh, Rachel's like, oh my gosh, you guys don't honk at animals in the road. This is so backward. And what? It's so quiet here. It just was very tropey. And I didn't feel like the story was very deep. And it was kind of boring. So her story is meh, but how cute she is and how cute some of the items in her collection are excel, like, they elevate her a little higher. Lainey, I love Lainey. She's cutesy. I guess I'm going to put Lainey at the top of meh because technically Lainey was unnecessary because she doesn't have a lot that's super unique about her, but I also kind of feel like she took ideas and concepts and doll designs and everything that had been done before, not very well, and did it better. So I kind of feel like that's where I am, although I conflicted because I feel like Lainey, I guess I'll put her here. Maybe if she had been a little more unique, she could have been amazing. But overall, she's pretty good. I don't have much to say. Sonali also could have been amazing if she had been a doll, like, in her own right. Like, if she had actually been a friend doll who had her own book, or like if she, Gwen, and Krista had been joint dolls, like The World by Us, or like some of the friends like Mary Grace and Cecile did later. Gwen's also kind of in that range. They could have done a lot with her. The two of them are basically tied. I think I'll give Gwen a slight yeah, because I don't know. They're basically tied. I don't know who is technically edging out the other one. They both have very interesting stories, more interesting than Krissa, and I really like them, especially in the movie. Krissa is gonna go here for could have been amazing. I really like Krissa, but I prefer the movie version of her. The book version of the story is just kind of cluttered and it's scattered all over the place and not as good. I feel like the movie is the superior way to consume Krissa's story, and Krissa is a better character in the movie. Mia, basically, in my opinion, is the perfect Girl of the Year doll. When making the doll ranking video, I realized just how great Mia really is. So that's why she's here. I love her name. I love her story and her struggles. Her collection is just the standard for Girl of the Year collections. Even though I wish it did have, like, maybe a few more outfits or, like, a little bit more. It was kind of small. But it was the biggest American Girl had done at the time. So I can understand why it was the way it was. But yeah, Mia also stands out from all of the other dolls. And even though American Girl is coming out with another, like, winter themed doll, Mia still wholly stands out from Corinne. Nikki is kind of the definition of unnecessary, but I have more personal attachment to her than to Leah or Kira. So, yeah, that's kind of, I don't have much to say about her. I think Nikki just had too much going on. Her collection wasn't very focused at all, and Nikki could have been much better. Jess is going down here for meh. Actually, no, I like her better than Yvette. Her story wasn't that interesting, and her collection was pretty small. So yeah, Jess is alright. She's very cute. Definitely one of the cutest dolls. Her story just is not as cool as others, and her collection is lackluster. Marisol is up here. She's awesome. Whoops. I love her story. I wish she had 2 books. I wish her collection was bigger. Basically, Marisol is great. I just wanted a lot more of her. Not really much to say. Her name's awesome. Kylie is one of the worst dolls in terms of actual, like, quality of her design. Her collection was terrible, or not terrible. It wasn't great. It was very, very small. Doll design was okay. She looks a lot like a Truly Me, but for the time, it's kind of to be expected. I wish her name was actually able to be pronounced. I've heard it pronounced every which way. I even found a forum of people who are actually named, like it's the same spelling, arguing over whether they're Kylie or Kaylee. And honestly, I've called her Kylie for like 14 years. So it's probably what I'm going to keep calling her, especially because American Girl themselves has not released an official pronunciation guide for her. So that sucks. At least that I can tell. If you know of a place where American Girl has officially said, this is how her name is pronounced, please link it down below. Oh, also her book is just written very badly. I didn't realize, for one, that her dog that they pitch is like her dog who's in all her photos and collection. It's just some random dog she met on the beach for like 1 page. And then also, the book feels very childish. Like, her parents are grown adults, and the mom is not like a hippie. She's like an actual marine biologist. And yet, she and Kylie's dad call the dude doing the development, they call him the man. Like, with the T and the M capitalized. And they just refer to him as the man. And I just found that very ridiculous. Her book makes Captain Planet look subtle. Lindsay is unnecessary. I know some people would probably be like, oh, she's the first girl of the year. She's 100% necessary. The thing is, one, I don't think that American Girl would have just given up on the brain. Clearly, Lindsay wasn't super well received, and yet they kept coming out with dolls. They were probably already developing Kylie and Marisol at least a little. Probably at least Kylie, because I know they went several years. Like, it wasn't every single year that they were doing this. So they probably at least had some of their ideas for future doll. And I think Lindsay had a lot there to her that could have worked. Maybe get someone writing her book. The book, reading it, felt like a child wrote it rather than it being a well-written book that was for children. You know, something more like Marisol's or Mia's. Lindsay had not so great theming and characterization. Her book was kind of poorly written, and her collection was kind of lackluster. So there just isn't really a lot to say about Lindsay. Her name is fine. She's a cute doll, but everything else is just eh. Now we get to the historical dolls. We're going to begin with Courtney, who I just feel kind of meh about. She's probably, I guess, for girl, if we were going by just girls of the year or dolls in general, Courtney's pretty good. For historicals, she's pretty lackluster. Actually, I would probably put her in unnecessary. I was like, is she here? I feel like Courtney is just unnecessary. She is a pretty blatant copy in a lot of ways from the Stargirl character Courtney Whitmore. If you look at them, especially the Stargirl show, you'll see so many similarities. I am shocked. For one thing, and this alone would be enough to be like, what was American Girl thinking without some of the other details? But Stargirl, as I said, is named Courtney Whitmore. The American Girl is named Courtney Moore. It's literally Courtney Moore versus Courtney Whitmore. It is insane. So Courtney is just, she's unnecessary. I like the idea of an 80s doll, but I feel like in terms of characterization and some of her theming, there wasn't really much unique done with her, and she didn't have enough to her collection to really stand out. Ivy is honestly, she'd be up here. If she was an actual doll with full-on books, she would be up in perfect, but I feel like she is a friend doll. I don't feel great. I don't feel like I can put not a full doll in perfect, but for a friend doll, she's perfect. She's the best. She should have been, like I said, a main doll. I don't think she should have been the only doll. I think Julie brought a lot to the table in terms of if we're trying to represent what life was like in that decade. I feel like things were very different, especially compared to other dolls American Girl had made. Julie did bring a lot to the table. She just didn't have enough to be the only doll. And Ivy was so unique and interesting. I wish they had been like joint dolls. Like Marie, Grace, and Cecile, where they each get several books. They each get kind of a full collection. They each get like maybe their own bed. And they're much better integrated into each other's stories than Marie, Grace, and Cecile are, which I will talk about shortly when I get to them. Melody is pretty good. Her collection wasn't great. I'm not a huge fan of it. I wish her name was a little less generic. But otherwise, I think Melody's good from what I remember of her books. I enjoyed her story. As a doll, she's pretty amazing. I really like her. But there isn't that much to really say about her. Mary Ellen is basically the definition of unnecessary. Almost everything about her is a retread from previous dolls. And she was okay, but I wasn't a huge fan of her characterization. And her collection was pretty terrible. She's one of the few dolls where I actually feel like stuff they did for her later trumps her early stuff. But yeah, Mary Ellen, her poodle outfit is really her only decent outfit, with some close seconds being her is it her play outfit or her softball outfit? I can't remember what it's called. But that one's alright. Her little sledding outfit they have now is pretty good. And I like her pink dress, even if the previous two I just mentioned aren't really 50s specific and don't necessarily suit her that well. I'm just not a huge fan of her name as well. American Girl has always done a good job, or for the most part, they've done a good job with making the names of the dolls stand out. Now, there are some exceptions. One of the things I don't like about McKenna is that her name is so similar to McKenna. I also don't like that Joss is named Joss and we'd already had Jess. Now, obviously, I prefer Joss to Jess as a character, and even in terms of names, the name Jess is just okay. It's not that unique. But yeah, that's disappointing. I also don't like Maritza. It's not super similar to Marisol, but it kind of is. So that's disappointing. But another thing American Girl has usually done a good job with is with the historical dolls, making sure their names are not super foreign. Like, you could kind of maybe see somebody in the past 30 years having that name, especially for like the early dolls. Like, we have Kirsten, whatever. Samantha, Molly, Felicity. I've known young girls named Felicity, and I'm pretty certain they weren't named for the doll. Addie could definitely see, yeah, like one of us is lying had a character named Addie, and it didn't feel out of place. So that one's good. Josefina is probably, for most of the historical dolls, the one whose name the most would be like, I don't know if a girl today would have that name. But overall, yeah, like they've had pretty good names. But Mary Ellen is such an old name and not very trendy, and her design is like a lot of other dolls, and she's just very forgettable, I feel like. Although, I don't know, she just kind of is the symbol, like, she does everything that I dislike about the Be Forever brand, and it's all in one doll, which is very disappointing. Also, just as a quick aside, I had actually, when was it? In 2012, come out with what I thought would be a cool 50s doll for American Girl. I wrote a paper for my English class about the 50s, like a research paper. And I kind of wrote what I thought would be a neat, or based on that paper, came up with what I thought would be a neat 50s doll. And Mary Ellen is basically the opposite of that doll, so that's just kind of funny to me. But yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of Mary Ellen.